I was the one in charge of crucifying Jesus. It was a day I will never forget. It was a day when it seemed like the sun just refused to shine. My name? The Bible never tells my name. Knowing my name isn't the most important thing. I just want you to remember that I was the one that gave the orders for Jesus to be nailed to the cross. But something else, you need to know that something else happened upon that hill. Because not only was I responsible for crucifying Jesus, but something else happened. And all of a sudden, I was the one that also declared that through His death, God was announcing life. Life. When I saw Jesus die on the cross, I could not help but cry out, truly this man is innocent. He's the Son of God. He was so different than anyone I knew, than any human being. He demonstrated a power like I'd never seen before. And He did things for me that no God I'd ever heard about had ever done for anybody that I knew, much less for me. Now we Romans, we didn't really believe in gods. We were taught to believe that our Caesar was God. Let me tell you, if Caesar's God, then we're in trouble. Me, I just like to see things tangibly. Like when I get into a tough spot, I want to know that there's something I can put my hands on. Something like my trusty sword or my sturdy shield. Aren't you like that sometimes? Yes, I know you're supposed to have faith in God, but don't you like to put your hands on things you can trust, like a home or your money or your friends? It's not easy to have faith in a God you can't see. Never forget that day. People were coming from all around to Jerusalem. Jews from all over were coming, and the armies, our army, we were on standby alert, because when all the Jews come into the Jerusalem for the festival, then the result of that is all of these Jews are running around celebrating all God had done for God's ancestors when He set them free from slavery in Egypt. Now, I wasn't a Jew, but I knew a little bit enough to know that that was a week filled with blood, as they sacrificed lambs. It occurred to me that in many ways Jesus was just like one of those lambs, led to slaughter, innocent, silent. I'm a Centurion, which seemed I'm responsible for about 100 men, and some of the men had been with me a long time. We had known suffering, we had seen death, we had caused death, we had seen agony, so none of that was a surprise to me. But when I watched what happened that day, it struck me to my heart. Pontius Pilate was our Roman governor, and I remember how surprised I was to hear that he had ordered Jesus to be crucified. I watched Pontius Pilate have 3 conversations with Jesus and then turn to his accusers on each occasion and say to them, I find this man to be innocent. And yet that was that same Pontius Pilate that stood on the portico and washed his hands of the whole event of things as if he had nothing to do with it. Saw him as he coddled the angry crowd and said to them, I'll give you Barabbas. I watched him as he coddled that crowd, and just to do something to take care of their bloodthirsty lust, he ordered Jesus to be scourged, and it was my men that stripped Jesus and lashed him to the pole and whipped him again and again and again in punishment. And then we made our way to Golgotha, that hill just outside the city. I watched as Jesus was nailed by His feet and hands fastened to the cross. But there was no anger in his voice. He didn't yell and scream or curse at me or anybody. Instead, do you know what he said? He turned to all of us. He looked at me. And he said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. What kind? How does that happen? Such agony, such pain. And yet he takes all that in, and what he gives back to us is forgiveness. What kind of power is that? It's something I had never seen before. As he hung on the cross, all of his enemies, they kept walking back and forth and screaming at him, "Oh, you're the Son of God. You come down from the cross. Oh, you can save others, but you can't save yourself." And to be honest with you, I wondered about that. I mean, how could Jesus be the Son of God? What kind of God that exists would allow his own Son to be insulted like that, to suffer like that? I mean, if Jesus was really God's Son, then wouldn't He take control of this situation? That's what I would have done with my sword and my shoot. I would have taken control. Shouldn't He be as God's Son taking control of all of that? But He just stayed silent. Like He was absorbing it all into Himself and stayed quiet. I overheard the conversation. There were two criminals that were crucified next to Jesus. At first they joined in with everyone else and were mocking Him and berating Him on the cross. And then one of them must have seen what I saw, and he realized Jesus was the innocent one of all three of them. And he yelled to the other criminal on the cross. He said, "You stop mocking him." And then he turned to Jesus and said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus turned and had a little smile on His face and said, "Truly I say to you, you will join me in paradise." All that agony and all that death and all that pain, I would be angry. Instead, what comes from His is a mercy and a love. What kind of power makes that real and possible? The morning dragged on, and it got to be about noon. Now, it was the middle of the day, mind you, and it was like there was darkness all over the land. I could barely see Jesus. But I heard Him at one point cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And then He seemed to grow quiet and had this human request. He cried out, "I thirst, I thirst." And one of my soldiers took a sponge and dipped it in the sour wine and put it on the top of a reed stick and lifted it up to him, and he drank from it. It seemed to refresh him. And then he grew quiet again. And you could see him struggle to take a big breath and to exhale like all of the heartbreak of the world, all of the heartbreak of one big task had finally been completed. And he took one more breath and said, "It is finished." He looked up and said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." And his head fell to his chest and he died. How do you love like that? How do you not be angry? How do you not be angry? How do you not have hatred in your heart? How do you not want to just pour out whatever you have left onto anyone gathered around there? And I saw none of that in him. And my spine There was chills running down my spine, and I cried out, and the only truth I knew in that moment, truly this man was innocent. He is the Son of God. Some people have said I must have had a lot of courage to say that at that point, but I don't know if it was courage. It doesn't take a lot of courage when you speak what you know is true. I can't forget the words he used. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Was that for me? I mean, how could that be? I was the one that gave the orders. I was the one that forced the men to nail him to the cross. I was the one that led them there. I was the one that let them happen. I was the one that was responsible. I'm the one that was guilty. I hear them ringing in my ears. I sleep and the words are in my dreams. Father, forgive them. After all that I had done, could He be forgiving me too? What kind of power is that? To take all of that and return with mercy and love and forgiveness. It's not like a power I ever knew. In our world, power was the sword. You know how it goes. Who has all the might is the one who's right, you know. But that's not what I saw. He showed me a different kind of power, a power willing to love instead of hate, a power willing to forgive instead of judge, a power willing to die even and pray, even for your enemies. After all I had done for Him, He forgave me. Oh, I wish we had more power like that in this world. Showed me that even death is not the end. There is life. One more thing. He forgave me, and I can't help but think that maybe somewhere in this room right now, there are some of us that think that there's something we have done, something we have caused, something we never did, something we wish we'd never said that would make us unforgivable. But let me tell you, from my experience, literally, I was the one that crucified Jesus. And He forgave me. And if He can forgive me, you know He forgives you. I mean, how else can I start over? How else can I live with those thoughts and those images on my mind except to know that even on the cross He took the worst in me and He returned with love so I could start new. What He does for me, I know He does for you.